He had the looks of a movie star, the temper of a street enforcer, and the nickname that made everyone smirk, Vinny Gorgeous. But there was nothing pretty about what he did to earn his spot at the top of the Bonanno family. By the early 2000s, the old mafia was crumbling, but not the Bronx. That's where Vincent Basciano held court. He wore designer suits, ran a hair salon called Hello Gorgeous, and when needed, ordered bodies to drop. He wasn't just flashy, he was feared. A capo turned acting boss, Vinny Gorgeous ran the streets with an iron fist. And when his boss flipped, he took over. But what he didn't know was the betrayal that was coming from the inside. And it was all caught on tape. Today, we're diving into the rise and fall of Vincent Basciano, how a Bronx pretty boy became the last true street boss of the Bonanno family, and how the wiretap era brought it all crashing down. Vincent John Basciano was born on November 14th, 1959, into an Italian-American family in the Bronx, New York. His parents were working class, and unlike many mob figures, he had no immediate family ties to organized crime. Growing up in the Moores Park section of the Bronx, Basciano was drawn to the local Italian-American street culture that was deeply intertwined with mafia presence. By his late teens and early 20s, he was associating with Bonanno family mobsters. He even served as a chauffeur for Bonanno captain Dominic Big Trend Trinchera and attended the infamous November 1980 wedding of Sicilian mob boss Giuseppe Bono at the Pierre Hotel. These early experiences introduced Basciano to the inner workings of the mafia at the ground level. Basciano didn't pursue higher education. Instead, he gained a street education in the Bronx. Law enforcement first took note of him in the 1980s. In 1987, at age 27, he was convicted on a felony weapons possession charge and served a one-year prison term. This conviction suggests that even before officially joining the mob, Basciano was willing to carry guns and involve himself in violent street activity. By all accounts, his formative years set the stage for a life in organized crime. He was a neighborhood guy with charisma, street smarts, and a willingness to do dirty work, qualities that would serve him well in the Bonanno family hierarchy. Basciano earned the nickname Vinny Gorgeous due to a beauty salon he owned in the Bronx. The salon, aptly named Hello Gorgeous, was located on East Tremont Avenue and doubled as a social club and headquarters for his criminal operations. Basciano was known for being immaculately dressed. He frequented tanning salons, he had manicures, and was always seen with this perfectly styled hair. Even years later, reporters marveled that he managed to appear perfectly groomed in court after spending months in solitary confinement. In addition to the salon, Basciano had other business interests that blurred the line between legitimate and illegitimate. For example, he owned or invested in at least one pizzeria in the Moores Park area, and he was involved in construction projects through mob-connected unions. Vinny Basciano's formal entry into the mob came in the early 1990s during a period of rebirth for the Bonanno family. In February of 1991, at the age of 31, Basciano was inducted into the Bonanno family at a secret ceremony in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. This ceremony was presided over by underboss Salvatore Vitali and consigliere Anthony Sparrow. Basciano's sponsor was Patty from the Bronx, Di Filippo, a veteran Bronx capo who stood in on behalf of imprisoned capo Charles Massillo during the induction. After taking the oath, Basciano became a soldier under De Filippo's crew based in the Bronx. Notably, the Bonannos had only recently reopened their books to new members around 1990 or 1991 after years of avoiding inductions due to the Donnie Brasco fiasco. Basciano was part of that new wave of loyal recruits along others like Salvatore Sally Horse Tozzi. And the timing made sense as the family was rebuilding and ambitious men like Basciano had room to prove themselves. Throughout the 1990s, Basciano built a reputation as an efficient mobster, both as an earner and a shooter. He operated primarily in the Bronx, engaging in classic Cosa Nostra rackets. Illegal gambling was one staple of his. He ran a bookmaking operation in illegal casinos. He also dabbled in loan sharking and extortion of local businesses. Within a decade of being made, Basciano rose to a leadership position. By around the year 2000, he had been promoted to capo regime of the Bonanno family. His crew included several up-and-coming gangsters who looked up to Vinny from the Bronx. Among them was Dominic Cicali, a younger mobster who became Basciano's protege and close confidant, and Anthony Bruno and Delicato, a fellow made man who, despite being older than Vinny, bonded with him. By the early 2000s, Basciano was a key figure in the Bonanno family, a charismatic capo with a loyal crew, significant earning power, and a knack for violence when needed. In the late 1990s, Vinny Gorgeous pulled off one of the underworld's most audacious cons, basically stealing from thieves. After learning that Jimmy the Gent Burke had hidden leftover cash from the 1978 Lufthansa heist, Basciano teamed up with Bonanno soldier Bruno and Delicato and Dominic Cicali to access the loot. You see, Bruno was married to Jimmy Burke's daughter, Kathy Burke. And Kathy had a sister named Robin who tended to be naive. And she started getting used by Vinny and Bruno. Using deception, Vinny and Bruno persuaded Robin to hand over the safety deposit key and then quietly drained about $2 million between 1999 and 2000. Instead of investing it, Basciano gambled most of it away, losing hundreds of thousands of dollars at Foxwoods and other casinos. And he even got banned at times for unpaid debts to the casinos. He even sank money into a doomed animated film about singing ferrets called Ferretina. By 2004, the cash was gone and the Burke family was enraged. Rumor has it that Kathy was ready to divorce Bruno over the deceit, but they remained married. You see, Vinny was a degenerate gambler, and in the end, virtually all of Jimmy Burke's secret fortune was frittered away by Basciano's gambling habit. Crucially, Basciano operated a variety of illegitimate and legitimate businesses and backed up these enterprises with intimidation and violence when necessary. He developed a reputation for having a ferocious temper beneath his well-groomed exterior. If an associate didn't pay on time or dared to disrespect him, Vinny Gorgeous wouldn't hesitate to threaten or assault him. FBI recordings and witnesses later recounted Basciano ranting about how he was a hoodlum and tough guy who wouldn't shy away from using force. This mix of entrepreneurial hustling and readiness for brutality made Basciano one of the most formidable Bonanno mobsters of his generation. By the early 2000s, Basciano demonstrated that he is willing to commit murder to protect his interest, even if it meant violating Mafia protocol. The most notorious example was the killing of Frank Santoro on February 15, 2001. Santoro was a Bonanno associate and a drug dealer who had a falling out with Basciano. The dispute turned personal and frightening. Santoro had threatened to kidnap Basciano's young son over a drug business issue. And obviously, Basciano reacted with fury. Without seeking approval from his family's boss, Joe Massino, he decided that Santoro had to die. Basciano recruited a hit team from within his crew. His close friend Dominic Cicali agreed to help, as did Anthony Bruno and Delicato, and another associate, Little Anthony Donato. Basciano coordinated the murder plot. They learned Santoro's habits and found an opportunity to ambush him outside his home in the Bronx. On the evening of February 15, 2001, as Santoro was walking his dog, the crew moved in. According to later court filings, Basciano himself was one of the shooters who sprinted out of the car and opened fire on Santoro. Santoro was shot multiple times and killed on the sidewalk. His dog reportedly remained by the body. This hit was a decisive message. No one threatens Vinny Gorgeous' family and lives. However, the Santoro killing was unsanctioned by the Bonanno leadership. At that time, boss Joe Massino was still on the streets, and typically any murder, especially of a family associate, required the boss's permission. In the early 2000s, the Bonanno crime family underwent a historic upheaval, and Vinny Basciano found himself rapidly elevated to the top. Longtime boss Big Joey Massino had steered the family since the 1980s, but by 2003, the FBI's relentless pursuit finally brought Massino down. In January of 2003, Massino and his underboss, Sal Vitale, was indicted for murder and racketeering, largely based on information from multiple turncoats like Frank Capa, Richard Cantarella, and others that flipped in 2002. As Massino sat in jail awaiting trial, he appointed an acting boss, Tony Green Urso, to run things on the street. However, Urso himself was arrested in late 2003. So the dominoes were falling fast, and the entire Bonanno administration was in legal problems. On July 30th, 2004, Massino was convicted of 7 murders, and he faced the death penalty. At that moment, the family's leadership effectively fell into Vinny's lap. By mid-2004, even before Massino's trial ended, Vinny Basciano had emerged as the acting boss of the Bonanno family. At 44 years old, he is considerably younger than the old guard, but many of Massino's older loyalists were either jailed or became informants. Basciano had proven himself capable, and importantly, he was still on the street and unindicted at the time. At a May 2004 trial of another mobster, an informant testified that the Bonanno's new boss is a salon owner, a clear reference to Basciano's role at the top. And this made news in the New York tabloids, which gleefully noted that Mafia's latest boss ran a beauty salon. Indeed, Basciano's ascent didn't go unnoticed by law enforcement. They knew he was effectively in charge after Massino's fall. Once in power, Vinny moved quickly to stabilize the shaky family. One of his first steps was to reorganize the family's hierarchy. He promoted Mikey Nose Mancuso, a Bronx-based soldier who had been inducted around the year 2000 to serve as acting underboss. Well, fast forward to late 2004, and Vinny made the decision to take out an associate named Randy Pizzolo. Pizzolo had been with Basciano for a few years, and the plan was for Pizzolo to be made, and Basciano was going to be a sponsor. But the promotion never happened because Pizzolo developed a bad reputation. He was seen as reckless, loud, and insubordinate. By the late 2004, Basciano grew fed up with Pizzolo's behavior, calling him a dangerous kid that doesn't fucking listen. Pizzolo reportedly had been mouthing off about family business and acting a fool, which Basciano viewed as a liability that could attract law enforcement attention. At this point, Basciano told Mikey Nose to have Pizzolo murdered, and the task was delegated to loyal soldiers in his Bronx crew. On the night of November 30th, 2004, Bonanno soldier Ace Aiello lured Pizzolo to a deserted industrial lot in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, under false pretenses. There, Aiello shot Pizzolo to death at point-blank range. The killing was swift and brutal. Pizzolo's body was left in the street as a testament to what happens to those who defy the Bonanno family. Basciano's tenure as acting boss spanned roughly from mid-2004 until his arrest in late November 2004. Though brief, it was a tumultuous period. For the most part, Basciano's few months as boss was spent dealing with internal threats like the troublesome Pizzolo, who he chose to eliminate, and legal threats, because he was aware that the FBI was targeting him next. Basciano's time at the helm was dramatically cut short on November 19, 2004. In the early hours of that day, FBI agents moved in and arrested Basciano on federal racketeering charges, including his involvement in the Santoro murder plot. The 2004 indictment against Basciano was expansive. It charged him with running illegal gambling and loan sharking operations and with conspiring to murder Frank Santoro. You see, the charge was attempted murder or murder conspiracy, since at that point, Santoro's actual murder hadn't been proven in court. Basciano was denied bail given his propensity for violence. The court deemed him a dangerous hood and danger to the community. Basciano was being held at the MDC in Brooklyn awaiting trial. Unbeknownst to him, Joe Massino was now fully on board as a government witness and would soon add to the case against him. You see, when Joe Massino was sentenced to life in prison in September 2004, he made the unprecedented decision to become a government informant, effectively betraying the Bonanno family. Massino's cooperation became known to FBI agents by early 2005 and eventually to the world by 2006. Joe Massino infamously gets Vinny Gorgeous recorded on tape, admitting to the Santoro murders and implicating other crew members in their illicit activities, like Dominic Cicali, who is now a capo regime. Massino had told authorities that Vinny was planning on taking out prosecutor Greg Andres, and Massino tried to coerce him to admitting this on tape, but Vinny wisely only insinuated a potential plot, but never admitted to it conclusively. Later, it was discovered that Vinny had written down a bunch of names that was part of a religious Santeria. Basciano's first major trial commenced in 2006 in federal court in Brooklyn. It was in the Eastern District of New York. In May 2006, after a lengthy trial, a jury convicted Basciano of racketeering, illegal gambling, loan sharking, and attempted murder in relation to the Santoro plot. However, on the most serious charge, the actual murder of Frank Santoro in 2001, the jury was deadlocked and hung. The partial verdict was a minor victory for Basciano, as he avoided an immediate murder conviction. Nonetheless, he is facing up to 20 years on the racketeering counts alone. The government wasn't going to stop. They weren't done. In 2007, prosecutors retried Basciano on the Santoro murder charge and associated counts that the first jury couldn't decide. This time, they brought in new star witnesses. Dominic Cicali, who was Basciano's protege turned traitor, had agreed to cooperate in early 2006 and was ready to testify in graphic detail about the Santoro slaying. Additionally, Joe Massino, the first official boss of a New York family ever to flip, was also lined up to testify if needed. Facing this avalanche of insider testimony, Basciano's defense stood little chance. On August 1st, 2007, the jury found Basciano guilty of the murder of Frank Santoro and sentenced Basciano to life in prison for it. The betrayal by his close friends during these trials were striking. Dominic Cicali, who had been like a little brother to Basciano, testified in chilling detail how he and Vinny carried out the Santoro hit together. Fast forward to 2011, Basciano had his next trial, and this was regarding the murder of Randy Pozzolo. In this trial, Joe Massino took the stand against him. Massino had made a deal to avoid the death penalty and was hoping to win a reduction of his 2 life sentences by helping convict Basciano. On the stand, Massino provided context to Basciano's rise and quoted incriminating lines from the jailhouse talks that were on tape. Jurors heard Massino ask Basciano via the hidden recorder about the plot to kill prosecutor Greg Andres. Basciano hedged in response, but Massino still conveyed to the jury that Vinny had considered it. More damning were the tapes that Basciano admitted they gave the order to kill Pozzolo, explaining that he's a dangerous kid and he doesn't fucking listen. In one portion, Basciano bluntly said of Pozzolo, "I ordered it." To hear a mafia boss openly confess to ordering a hit in his own words was powerful evidence. Massino's testimony thou sealed the case that Basciano had been the boss behind the Pozzolo murder. In May 2011, Vinny Basciano was convicted of capital murder for ordering the 2004 murder of Randy Pozzolo. This conviction opened Vinny to the possibility of a federal death penalty. But on June 1st, 2011, the jury reached a decision. They rejected the death penalty and instead sentenced Basciano to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. It was the final nail in the coffin for the Bonanno Street leadership that had tried to hold things together in the early 2000s. So where did Vinny end up? He ended up at ADX Florence in Colorado, often referred to as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. This supermax prison housed the most dangerous and the most high-profile inmates in the country. You had terrorists, cartel leaders, and other mob bosses like Anthony Casso. You also had guys like Terry Nichols. Vinny's days of tailored suits, salons, and Bronx sit-downs was over. Now it was 23 hours a day in a concrete cell with no contact and no chance of seeing the streets again. Even from behind bars, though, Vinny never flipped. He never testified, never cooperated. In a world where turncoats became common, Vinny Gorgeous went out old school, silent, convicted, and doing life. Michael Mancuso would spend a few years in prison, but was made the new Bonanno boss and would eventually be on the street running the family. Eventually, Vinny would leave ADX, and as of today, he's spending his sentence at the USP Coleman in Florida. He still has hope of freedom as he's trying to get a retrial on the Pozzolo conviction. As of 2025, the retrial decision is pending a thorough review of all the thousands of pages of court transcripts. Even if he could get the 2011 conviction overturned, Vinny still has a life bid for the 2006 Santoro murder conviction. Vinny Gorgeous's criminal career and downfall hold a significant place in modern mafia history. In many ways, his story encapsulates the violent decline of the New York mob in the 2000s. He was one of the last acting bosses of the Bonanno family during its heyday, and his imprisonment marked the end of an era. Consider that by 2007, every Bonanno boss or acting boss since 2002 was behind bars. Massino, Urso, Basciano, Mancuso is a clean sweep for the FBI. Basciano's conviction in 2011 was particularly momentous because it was achieved through the unprecedented testimony of a turncoat boss. And this shattered the mafioso code of honor in a very public and embarrassing way. The trial became a symbol of how far Cosa Nostra's standards had fallen. The official boss betrayed his loyal acting boss. For mafia watchers, this was more shocking than any Hollywood movie. It demonstrated that no one was above snitching if it meant saving one's own skin, not even a mafia don, a reality that's arguably deterred new recruits and accelerated the mob's decline. Basciano's legacy within the mob itself is a bit dual-edged. On one hand, he's respected by many old-timers for not flipping. A popular sentiment in mob circles is that Vinny Gorgeous kept his mouth shut while everyone around him became informants. Indeed, of the major Bonanno players at the time, Bonanno stands almost alone in that regard. He took multiple life sentences rather than helping the government. On the other hand, Basciano's actions also sowed seeds of destruction for his own crime family. His impulsive murders and aggressive plots, like the talk of killing a federal prosecutor and possibly fellow mobsters, arguably made the Bonannos even more of a target for law enforcement. Some in the Bonanno family likely blamed him for stirring the pot at the worst possible time. After Massino's arrest, had Basciano been more cautious, perhaps the family could have regrouped quietly. Instead, the Pozzolo murder in late 2004, which was unsanctioned, gave the FBI fresh ammunition to go after Bonanno's new leadership. In the end, Vincent Basciano's importance lies in being, as one organized crime writer puts it, the last of the Mohicans. In his context, the last acting boss of the Bonannos to operate in the traditional vein before the family values fully gave way to informants and federal pressure. He was a product of the old school mafia values, but he also embodied the mafia's inability to adapt to modern law enforcement. His rise was fueled by personal force of will and street cunning. His fall was sealed by betrayal of mentors and friends. Basciano lived by the gun and omerta, and like many, he stuck to omerta, yet he still lost everything. The Bonanno family that exists today is a quieter shadow of its former self, partly because of the heavy blows sustained during the era of Massino and Basciano. And in that history, Vincent Basciano stands out as a charismatic, controversial figure, the impeccably groomed mob boss who ran a beauty salon and ordered murders, gambled away a fortune, and ultimately traded his kingdom for a prison cell. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Real Mob Stories with James Proctor. And I hope it gave you a clearer look into the world of Vinny Gorgeous and the Bonanno family. Hit that like button to show your support. Also, subscribe to the channel for more true, researched, and in depth mob history. Also, don't forget to visit realmobstories.com for even deeper dives, source documents, and more exclusive content. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and God bless you always.